All right, Zach, thanks for having me in today. So we're going to kind of talk through the observation, and I shared some stuff with you in between now and then, just some of the things I saw. So today, now I just kind of wanted to have more of just a conversation about the activity and the lesson for today. Okay?
Yep.
So let's just start off kind of like real, kind of just light, I guess, as we think about it. So talk to me about the lesson as you remember it, just kind of maybe some general things that stand out to you about your lesson today.
Wanting to pull my hair out after we leave that place. I mean, that's it was a frustrating lesson, and that's part of the process, and just understanding where you think you are, and then sometimes you be brought back to where we really are, and sometimes maybe thinking about, did we go too fast? What are we missing? So why was today a struggle? And so I walk out of that room thinking, I know I'm frustrated, I know that I'm at some point even angry a little bit, but why am I angry? It's because the kids don't understand what we were trying to do, and something that I thought was an extension of something that they've already mastered, an extension of something they've already done, and now where do I go? So my immediate thought was, where do I go for tomorrow? What do I do? Do I back up? Do I reteach this entire thing, or do I even go further back to things that we've already done? So my mind went to, what do I got to do tomorrow that is going to help this situation today?
Yeah, it was. I could tell you were a little frustrated at certain parts during the lesson today. So let's think about just the day in general. So maybe the question is, was it a normal day for you? And I kind of know some of the things that happened. So maybe the question specifically is, what things did you plan? You don't have to focus on what you plan to do today, but what things in general were you planning to do today that you had to change? Or what kinds of things happened today that maybe didn't make it feel like a normal day to at least start with, as far as that lesson went?
Yeah, so with the assembly being longer than we anticipated, then that messes up our whole times and switches, and when the special ed teacher was coming in, and so that timed all wrong, and so that one group that was supposed to be working with that special ed teacher was not going to happen. So the timing was already messed up, which I think sometimes messes with all kids when everything's a little bit different. They're confused, they don't know if they have special or not. So even weird things like questions coming into the room that just knew that their day is already kind of weird now. So that started off that way. But obviously the entire lesson would have dictated me to change things as we went along the way, just by the feel of things, just by the sea of things, we were going to have to change things. But it definitely started off with that time overlapping with the assembly that already was starting our day off in a weird spot. So
yeah, we definitely have to kind of like be flexible sometimes.
Flexible, absolutely.
And that's a little harder on kids maybe. So maybe my next question, so now your frustration with the lesson, and you know, it's been a few hours, so maybe you've moved past it a little bit, but let's put yourselves in the role of the students. So how do you feel the lesson went for them today? What kinds of things might they have left there feeling or thinking about when you think about that lesson?
I think for some of them, they probably feel the exact same way that I did. It's that frustration piece. Every kid wants success, just like every teacher wants success for their kids. And so when you walk out of something and you're not sure that you were successful that day, and that you can't meet that I can't say that's on the board, then obviously I think that's probably a feeling that's pretty mutual between us and the kids. And I could feel that, I could see that as the back group table went on. Is there kids that I think got better and started to figure things out by the end? Yeah. Well, I think there were some kids that were starting to figure things out, but the best is that those kids know that my policy is that we don't understand, then we're going to figure it out. And so they all know that they're going to come back tomorrow and we're going to figure it out, we're going to fix it together. And so that's just the routine that we built, that's just a conversation, a relationship that we built, that I know my kids are not going to go home and stew about this like I am. I mean, I'm going to go home and figure out ways to fix this, and they're going to come back and be ready to go after it tomorrow. I mean, but there's probably a similar feeling as frustration a little bit with some of them, for sure.
Absolutely, yeah. I think we've both kind of experienced some of that, felt some of that with a couple of the kids as we think about those. So let's change gears just a little bit and talk specifically about your time. So when we talked in our pre-observation about some of the things that would happen, you had your extra math time and your 2-minute math time, your whole group. So let's just focus on extra math just for a second, about 10 minutes. long as how long you used during that time. Tell me some of the things you observed your kids doing, or issues they might have been having, or things that you saw about your students, because I saw you work the room during that time and work with kids. They use the extra math as kind of math facts, kind of strengthening those. Is that correct?
Fluency part.
Yeah. So fluency. So talk to me about just briefly, just a few things you observed during that time.
Yeah, the big thing is that we're trying to get kids. I mean, it also builds on that typing part. So getting them logged into the computer and doing those little things, and that's part where that frustrates me, because we have to walk around and kind of help some of those kids do that and get logged in. So that's my first component: is make sure everybody gets logged in and they're on the right place. And for the most part, most kids get on there pretty easy, and there's some that I need help. So that's the starting out of it. And then as I walk around, I want to see the kinds of things that they should know with the addition strategy. So some kids are doing, in this class it's primarily addition or subtraction. You're not any farther than that. Now in the other class they might be doing multiplication and division already. You pass out of it. So the faster you get, the better you are. You pass out of that. So today you're seeing mostly addition in this one, because we've grouped that so that our class this is the low class. So for the most part, I'm going around and I'm seeing what strategies are being used, if any. And so when I see kids that are just typing numbers and I don't see them thinking, or I don't see their mouths moving or their fingers moving or anything like that, I want to make sure that there is some sort of strategy there. So 9 plus 3, and a kid was sitting there looking at the screen, and I wanted to be able to say, well, what's the strategy? Are you gonna touch the 3? You know, start at 9, go 10, 11, 12, and do your touches on the 3. So I walk around and kind of walk and just make sure that there's something happening. It's not just a blank stare, or it's not just random button pushing. So there is a reason for the walk around and talking, but some of that is why some of those kids are why we do the special ed intervention when Ms. Ford comes in, is that they're working on those strategies, so those addition, subtraction strategies. So I know some kids don't have all those yet, and that's partly what she comes in and does with those, but other kids should be, the other kids who aren't special ed should be should already have all these addition strategies. So then it's me using this time to try and figure out why we're not getting past that barrier. So something that we've decided as a whole K through 5 building is a problem, or as our fluency. So something that we build into our routine every single day.
And so then your 2-minute math, what's the purpose in that? Just kind of walk me through that, because and again, some of the things maybe you're looking for as you walk around, because I walked around during that time too and watched students, and so there were some things they could do and couldn't do on there. So kind of give me a little bit of an understanding of the purpose of that.
Yeah, 2-minute math is something that we do every single day. It's always 10 questions, and it allows the kids to keep track of their score. And so hopefully as the year progresses, you're starting to see that those kids are more successful with these. And so a quick 2-minute thing where each question is either of a 3rd grade skill, 4th grade skill, or even a farther along 4th grade skill. So a lot of the stuff on it they've seen, some of the stuff on it they haven't seen. So we talk about test taking strategies with that. So if you get to something that you don't know, are you going to sit there and waste the 2 minutes on that problem? No, you're going to skip it and you'll come back to it at the end. So we'll work on those. Things that doesn't make sense, we want to skip and move on and come back to. So I tie that into that time, but I also want to make sure it's a time that I can look back and make sure that the skills that we've already passed are already done with, or they've shown mastery of. Addition, subtraction, place value, all those things, depending on the day, will be on that. So I can check and just do a quick check of who, or if they aren't getting that right, then I can jot down a note that says this person missed a subtraction problem today. I need to hit that with him during Fix It Friday or whatever we want to do. So that's a time for that, but then also a time to see for those flyers that are seeing questions that they wouldn't normally get until later on in the year. So now I'm at least exposing them to that, so they're hearing those terms, those vocab terms, they're seeing those, and then have a short conversation on some of those things. So a time that I just think is a time for me to fill some minds with some random thoughts and some conceptual and just some things that they normally wouldn't get. And so a time that builds on a little bit of everything, from things that they should know to what they're going to get to know.
So I'm going to push you just a little bit about those two things, and you can go a little further other directions. But so one of the teaching standards that you addressed in our pre-conference that I would see, and that we could talk maybe a little bit about after the observation, was multiple methods. You use multiple methods to monitor student learning. So to me, as I hear you talking, from what I saw, the extra math and the 2-minute math were two things that I jotted down and used to monitor their learning, as well as So having discussions with students from the board, obviously every small group, your whole group time where you're, walking around, you're talking with kids, you're pulling them, maybe your comment was you wanted to get a kid, are you with me at the board, so you called on that kid to kind of make sure that they're there, but you're trying to monitor your kids. So push you a little bit, what does 2-minute math and extra math do for you? How do you use the results for instructional decisions?
I guess with the extra math is something that every single day it gives me a color of what they are, so the amount of it that they've missed or they didn't get the time right. So every single day they'll get a color: red, yellow, or green. Green meaning they got 90% correct in a fast enough time, so they'll be green for that day. And their graph would show that, or portray that. Red or yellow would mean that they maybe missed between 80 and 70% or whatever, or got 80 to 70% right, and then red would mean they missed a lot of problems. So that's something quick that I can tell them what their color is. You might have heard me saying that, so they know where they were at that day. And then usually in our white binders, what we'll do is we'll take that and we have calendars in there and we'll color in what color they were for that day. So it's something visually for them to know where they are, if they're getting better, if they're getting worse, they had a bad day, they had a good day. But also the extra math site keeps track of that and can graph that, so that's data and that's evidence for people, mom, dad, anybody at conferences want to know what's going on in math or what we're doing. And so that's another piece of evidence that I use and show where they're at with their fact fluency, especially with addition and subtraction right now, and hopefully in the future with multiplication and division. So something again like we said is a huge piece to what we do in the elementary, or something that we found is a problem. So that's what we use. With the 2-minute math, again, it's something that the kids will keep track of, so they put that in their white binders again, and then hopefully it's another piece of just collecting data. So we don't talk much about, we talk a lot about data, but that's not necessarily part of what we do until later on in the year. So kids understand what data is, and so they're collecting it, and then they can use all that information. But hopefully what they're seeing is that they're getting better as the year goes on. They're starting to get more and more problems right. But again, it's just exposing kids to things that they haven't maybe not necessarily seen, but that doesn't necessarily, I don't group kids based on that.
Too much.
I don't
Sure.
I really won't.
Sure. So you mentioned in the beginning, today was a frustrating day on some level. So how did you monitor progress during your small group time or during your board time when you're teaching your whole group? Maybe specifically I'll ask you, after today, how do you know what percentage of your kids got it and what percent didn't? And maybe today was an easy answer, but how do you know, and then who do you know, so that you can push those a little bit farther?
Yeah,
as you prepare for tomorrow, I guess.
Yeah, and if I have a good idea of the number of kids that I think would be able to move on tomorrow using this stuff, and some of the kids that are not even ready to go there. So that's where the confusion is for me, or a little bit of the challenge for me right now is figuring out what do I do tomorrow, because if I can't do that in the whole group, then what am I teaching in my whole group tomorrow? Where am I teaching whole group tomorrow? Am I breaking up and saying today's completely small groups, and then we're going to make sure that those kids and those 6 or 7 that I know don't get it, have no idea really about it, what am I doing with them? And so we'll have to supplement with that and say that we're going back to 3-digit by 1-digit, 2-digit by 1-digit, and we're drawing that area model, and then we'll try and rekindle whatever we've already previously done. And that was kind of a surprise to me, was I thought it would maybe spark some of that, and didn't really see much of that. So
Sure.
Confusion on why we weren't putting those things we've already previously talked about with area models to what we already have. For me, the collecting data was easy today, because it was one that I didn't even have to grab and hold in my hand. I could literally look out on a very sloppy piece of paper and know that didn't make sense, and I didn't have to even get close to see that doesn't make sense to them. So
yeah, so as we think about those other standards that you talked about in the pre-conference, so multiple methods of monitoring student learning, but also competency and content knowledge. I mean, obviously that's not an issue. You talked about lots of different things, right? Multiplication strategies, zeros. I heard you talk about place values. You have lots of those things going on, so I'm not sure that would even be a question. You're obviously very strong in that area, but the strategy part, so here you have a strategy, area model, that you had taught students with like a one-digit multiplication, a one-digit times something else, and felt successful, and then today you tried it with two-digit numbers and now it wasn't as successful. So anything you think about that strategy, as you reflect on that strategy, that as you're thinking about that tomorrow, how will you do it a little different? You know, what is that strategy viable? Is, you know, so maybe just talk out loud about that a little bit, where your thoughts were 2 hours later, 3 hours later about that.
Yeah, so you kind of heard me in the beginning say which kids use the area model and 6 or 7 raise their hand, and which kids use the partial products in 4 or 5, and then which ones use the algorithm or the regrouping strategy in 6 or 7 raise your hand. So you see that just off what we do with one digit, we have a pretty big split within the room of what strategy they use and what strategy they're best at. So now we're going back and saying everybody's going to try this.
Sure.
And so 6 or 7 are probably going to be, oh, that's pretty close to what I'm good at.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's about 12 or 15 that are like, that don't
I'd
make
rather
much
do it a
sense.
different way.
Let me, give me partial products, give me the regrouping. Well, they're not ready for that, I can promise that. But it's just that, it's trying to figure out how can, so tomorrow I'm trying to figure out what was the misconception? What was it that didn't make sense? What does make sense to those 6 kids that they can do it, that doesn't make sense to these other 10? So is it because I did graph paper? Because when we started to do our area models earlier, we did graph paper for 2 days, and then we moved away and just said, now draw a rectangle and put in the numbers, break it apart, what are the 2 numbers, and then we just went. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what kids wanted to do right away, because even before I even did anything, I was telling them to stop. One girl had already drawn the rectangle, had already split it apart, and then I had to say, are we doing that right now? She's like, no. And it's like, it was wrong because she didn't have the numbers right perfectly, but it was an area model.
Kind of had an idea.
It was an area model, and it was actually like, if it was just white paper with no graph marks, it probably would have been okay in my eyes. But because today I wanted it to be a perfect 15 and a perfect 12, and I think that was maybe part of the confusion.
Sure. So how do you judge that as a teacher? So I'm trying to think about how you plan your activities and your lessons when, and I'm not going to be able to quote exactly, but when the math standards address kids using multiple strategies to solve problems, and you're trying to teach them strategies, at what point do you say, okay, I'm done teaching the whole group this strategy because this many have it, but those don't. Now I need to try a different strategy for them. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, how many days do you spend trying to teach them this strategy when 6 to 10 of them are going to be solid at it and the rest aren't?
Yeah, and that's the hard part with this, is that it's not just you're going to do the regrouping and we're going to do it for 4 weeks and we're going to just drill and drill and drill and drill and be done, and then you're going to get it or you're not. I mean, this is one where we're trying to make sense, and so the area model is one that is visual, so you can see it. You should be able to see that each one of those is everything on the inside, and I could literally, like you said earlier, I could count every single box and know that what's in the inside is on the inside. And so not only is it partial products, it's a picture of partial products, and so that's where I would think it would be a start of, and I think that's where most people think that's where it would be a good start, because you're actually giving kids a picture of something. They're actually physically coloring in things. They're actually seeing colors of different partial products. To me, I think that every kid should understand at least some part of the area model. I mean, because if they don't, then they don't really understand the place value.
The smaller parts, that are more important.
And they don't have maybe number sets. So part of me feels like every kid, whether they chose to use it, I would say most kids don't choose the area model when we do we do one digit products, because it takes the longest. I would say almost every one of them could do it.
And what do they choose?
Most my high kids, so my high class, all of them use the algorithm.
I see the algorithm. Yeah, so one thing you asked me to do was pay attention to student conversations. So I know this was your lower group, right? This is how you have them divided. So I will tell you that I had kids, I heard talking to you, kids saying, I use the algorithm, and kids talking about place values. When you broke into small groups, I kind of went out with they were all working on their own thing, but there were about 3 girls kind of working together, and one was struggling. And what was quite interesting to me was the one girl was walking her through it, what's 10 times 10, and should maybe know that as fact fluency kind of thing, but okay, what's 1 times 1? And she's like, 1. And then how many zeros do we have? Let's add those zeros. Now we're at 100. I mean, so I heard your kids using your language, talking about strategies that they use and why they use them. So that's a positive, I think, as far as that goes. That makes, it tells me that you've drilled those strategies, they've worked those strategies, they've known them. We talked about the day and how things were a little different, but also, it's, there's a lot to it. I noticed a lot to it as far as colors and markers and distraction, right? Just a lot of things going through their head as far as what do we get to do, and I could see where it was a bit of a challenge that way, for sure. Okay, let me just kind of move on here just a little bit to kind of get us a little bit closer here. So you mentioned some of those frustrations. We talked just briefly here a little bit about it. How will you cut down on that tomorrow? Think about a plan, right? I mean, you're going to be here tomorrow teaching these kids, and today the markers got in the way and the graph paper, and they didn't draw down the boxes, they drew down the middle of them, and they were just being kind of sloppy, were words I heard you using, and that's what it was on some level. So tomorrow they come back at 9:30 to do this again. How are you going to attack that differently?
I think it's, for me, it's going to be a backward step. So we're going to take it back to single digit by single digit. I mean, just to simply draw a 3x4, and just to make sure that they understand what I mean by drawing it on the outside instead of down the middle, and just baby stepping it back, just so that that is not a part of the problem. You know what I mean? And I was trying to figure out during the whole thing if that was truly the problem. And there was a time where I just said, okay, I think that is the problem.
Sure.
Let's get to small groups and let's figure this thing out, because I know I can help those kids better in a small group rather than the whole.
Yeah, so you make that adjustment. Let's just put this down and come back here and let's start talking.
So that's me just saying, okay, I think that there's some bigger issue there, and so I just want to have those conversations in a small group to see and make sure everybody's on the same page, because it's hard to get everybody on the same page in the whole group sometimes. So that was my idea behind getting in the small groups a little bit in a hurry. Not the time was already messed up anyway, but still, I knew the whole group was going longer, and I knew I spent more time, and I knew my frustration was probably based on them not drawing the rectangle the exact way that I wanted it. So if I do really want it that way, and I really want them to make sure that it's graphed right and it's to scale and everything's the right way and it's split perfectly at 10 and 5, then I have to probably back up and do that. Now, if I decide that I really don't care and that I just wanted to see that they can split this rectangle up, then I don't need the graph paper, and I can just simply say,
Sure,
draw the rectangle on a piece of paper and split it up the way that you would, because that's going to show that they know place value. It will.
And get ones, tens, and hundreds,
Yeah,
whatever.
it'll still show me that they can split up a 10 and a 5 and know that there's a difference. It's 15 is still 10 and 5, and that's the best way to break it up because it's easy to multiply with 10 and 5. They should know that. I think almost every kid in the class did know that today. I think today it was truly that they had a graph paper and they didn't do it right. I mean, they didn't put the lines in the right spot, so then it messed up everything because, well, I put my line at 10, but now I only got 4 on the bottom, and I should have 5. Well, because you put your line, and you didn't count your boxes right. And so, is that the whole issue why today stunk? Maybe, but if we want to be able to supplement, if we want to make tomorrow better, then we got to figure out how important is that to me? Is it important to those kids? Or is it just as important to put it on a white piece of paper and say, let's just get it done? That's where I'm a little struggling with, because I think it is important that we do know that we can split up that graph as 10 and 5, and it should be perfect. Because I think we're teaching more than just an area.
Yeah, you're trying to go a little farther.
Right.
So let me kind of wrap up here with just a couple things. So what I hear you saying probably tomorrow is going to be a little less, if not any, group time. I mean, big group time, whole group time, and you're just going to really try to get after the smaller issues and try to really work this out with different kids. Do you think it might benefit you to the 6 kids that already use the area model, have them be a group, and the kids that aren't using the area model, break those into smaller? Is that already happening? I mean, or do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. Yeah, and so what we've already got grouped on is based off the previous multiplication unit. So you're exactly right. I'm not grouping them right now off of the strategy that they previously used.
I see.
It is not. It is based on the amount of problems that you've gotten right. So it was me sitting at the back table, which was sometimes frustrating because you almost wanted to be grouped that way so you can help them all at the same time with the same strategy. But it was also a nightmare that way too. So I grouped them based on what they've shown me and their level of mastery. So I had kids that have shown me early on that they understood multiplication in a group versus those kids that I thought with my support would be able to do it pretty easy, and then a group that I knew needed me. And so that's how that's grouped, and that's how it's still set up for today. So yeah, tomorrow it might be as simple as, can we group them based on the strategies that they used, and maybe we'll see that that's a little bit easier, and really see that that is kind of a low, high, and medium group based on what they've already previously used. So that is absolutely an option to think about, and group them in something pretty easy.
So I think I asked that question for your own, as an observer, right? So this is why I come in the room today, just to observe and maybe give you some feedback from a different perspective. So take this as constructive. So one of the things you asked me to do was listen to your conversations with your students at your small table,
Yep.
right? And you asked me to maybe kind of think about the questions you're asking them and where you're differentiating your questions based on their needs. And as I looked through the questions you asked them, I kind of struggled with that just a little bit. And I struggled with it because I think you were frustrated with it. Like, I don't even know how to differentiate these questions because, wow, right? I mean, we're all over the map. And so you kind of just stuck to one line of discussion with all of them, as opposed to, because they were kind of all over the map. You were really just more teaching them again, not asking questions, trying to get them. So maybe by grouping them differently, that might help with a line of questioning for each one, kind of help you organize those thoughts a little bit as you try to take them down that path. So the last question I think I'll ask you is about your supports. Like, so obviously you have an aide in the room, a para in the room, right? You have a special ed person in the room, yourself in the room. You and your teaching partner made that decision to split that group. Take all those kids as, mid-low to low, basically, which makes a whole lot of sense, right? If they're all struggling, why would you'd be all over the place, right, with high and trying to teach a lesson. But talk to me about, here we have this group, they're challenging now. So what kind of supports do you need to help you continue down this path with them from your principal, right? I mean, obviously your principal supported the idea of splitting them, but now, what kinds of extra things might you need, or instructional coach? And when I say that, I mean co-teaching, because you are back there trying to work with these kids, and then those kids are up there, and I witnessed kids up there that probably needed to be back there pretty quick, but they weren't back, you know what I mean? It's almost unmanageable on some level. So as you think about it, perfect world, if you could design it any way to get these kids, because we have a math problem in our school, how are we going to help them? What kinds of things? Just brainstorm.
I could pick what
Yeah, well, how are we going to reach those kids today?
Title I math.
Title I math.
That's the answer.
Title I math. Why is that the answer? You're just sorry.
No, but I think that is something
sure.
that is
It's an extra support, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's because we've identified these kids that are struggling, that aren't as special ed. What can I do? So I mean, some of these things are bigger issues than multiplication. So I mean, we've identified kids that truly, not being able to count 977, 78, 79. I mean, not being able to continue that count. I mean, so those are big number sense problems. So we've identified those. So then it's a matter of today. It's like we split the low and high, which I think is great. Great because I know my high kids are really, really benefiting.
Mm-hmm.
And so now it's two different lessons. I mean, it's two different.
Are you good with that?
My high kids are they're taking a test on two-digit multiplication tomorrow.
Okay.
My kids just started two-digit multiplication 2 days ago. So I mean, you're seeing that I'm able to move at a different pace with this other class, be able to reach, and hopefully at a certain point be able to do more and more challenging and more things with that group. So as much as this is a frustration, my afternoon class is the exact opposite. I mean, it changes your idea, because you know that you've done the exact same things with these kids. These kids get it, so you know something's working. So you know something that you've done is already right, and these kids understand it. And so then now it's a matter of how can I get these kids to get to where these kids are. And the reality is maybe I can't necessarily do that myself.
Sure.
So who can help me? And it's like you said, well, yeah, I think having a co-teacher every single day would be awesome, but that's not realistic.
Sure.
So could I get a co-teacher once a week? that would be maybe helpful, because I know that coach teacher can maybe come in and work on those things that I know that
Yeah,
they're
you plan
way
together,
beyond.
this is the thing they need to work on, right,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
And so if I've identified that, and I can tell that person that that's what I need you to do, and that's what we've done with the special ed teacher.
Mhm.
We've said that these 5 kids I know don't know these strategies. So please, once a day, for that 20 minutes, work with that special ed teacher and the other one to fix it.
I think it's still working, Haas.
Phone issue, it still is counting up, so, yeah, exactly. I mean, I asked you to give perfect world there and talk through that, you know. I'm interested, I was glad you mentioned, you know, where your high kids are, where your low kids are, you know, that you're working through that, you know. I think it is as we talk about that at our district, it's a bigger issue. Maybe it's Title I math, maybe it's a revamp of what we do K leading up to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, you know. Is it fact fluency, is it number sense, is it, you know, so there's a lot probably that goes into that, so, but I appreciate you being, you know, honest about how, I mean, one thing for sure is, as I wrap up, I'll just say this, you know, I appreciate the opportunity to be able to sit in there, you know, great job kind of thing as far as those go, but what I know about you is you're always reflective, right? I mean, you're gonna put a ton of time into this, planful, with your kids, and I think those kids, you know, whether it takes a day or 4 days to get them there, you're probably gonna move that way, so you did a really nice job working through your strategies with those kids. I believe from my observation that they're hearing those things and they're talking that way, they're using the language, they're just gonna move a little slower at it, so.
It was a brand new day for them.
Yeah,
It was
brand
a
new day.
complete thing for them, so.
Great, well, I appreciate you having me in, and thanks for this time.
No problem.
Thanks, buddy. Yes, man.